Hello, everyone. I said yesterday's show would be relatively useless, and we would try and do another show when the news of the VP pick came out, and here we are today. Kamala Harris has picked Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota. Walz? I'm tempted to say Walz, but I know it's Walz. We will give you the full reaction. We'll give you my take. We'll give you the latest on how the campaign is responding. Also, some pretty funny clips to play for you regarding this vice presidential pick from the Kamala side and also from the media side. Also, Israeli press is saying the U.S. and allies are telling Israel to take some interesting measures when it comes to responding to the expected upcoming, very, very much upcoming, emphasis on the upcoming there, Iranian attack, as well as 7 U.S. personnel injured in an Iraqi Air Force base. We'll give you all of the latest on that. Also, another pretty important story with the UK. Some absolutely incredibly horrific videos coming out of the UK, and something that, with all the chaos in our own political world, has not gotten enough attention. Literally, drivers being stopped, their race being checked on the road. Horrific stuff. We'll give you all of the latest right here on Newsflash. So, Tim Walz is the new running mate of Governor Tim Walz is the new running mate of current Vice President Kamala Harris. The duo right now is in Philadelphia and preparing to make their debut at a rally this evening. Democrats quickly embraced the new Democratic ticket on Tuesday, even as Republicans raced to brand the pair as beholden to the most progressive forces in the party. Oh no! In the span of roughly 2 weeks, Walz, a folksy former social studies teacher and football coach, went from a little-known Midwestern governor to a Democratic star. His rise was fueled by his catchy attacks on former President Donald Trump, including declarations that Republicans were pushing weird ideas. Democrats hope he can appeal to middle-of-the-road voters, especially in the upper Midwest. So that is the New York Times analysis of it there, which is pretty good. Let's take a look, I guess, at his video. These are all kind of, a little bit boring, but here is what he had to say in the vice presidential, essentially acceptance video that he released on Twitter.
Sometimes life is as much about the lessons you learn as the lessons you teach. When I grew up, community was a way of life. My high school class was 24 people. I was related to half of them. I learned to be generous towards my neighbors, compromise without compromising my values, and work for the common good. My dad was in the Army, and with his encouragement, I joined the Army National Guard when I was 17. I served for 24 years. I used my GI benefits to go to college and become a public school teacher. I coached football and taught social studies for 20 years. And I tried to teach my students what small-town Nebraska taught me: respect, compromise, service to country. And so when I went into government, that's what I carried with me. I worked with Republicans to pass an infrastructure bill, cut taxes for working families, signed paid leave into law. I codified abortion rights after Roe got overturned. Because I go to work for the common good. But enough about me. Let's talk about you. Because that's what this election is about. It's about your future. It's about your family. And Vice President Harris knows that. She too grew up in a middle-class family. She too goes to work every day, making sure families can not just get by, but get ahead. We believe in the promise of America, in those values I learned in Nebraska, and we're ready to fight for them. Because as Kamala Harris says, when we fight, we win.
So Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, the official Democratic ticket there. And what I thought was a pretty good announcement video from Harris and from Walz there, and you can see a little bit why I think this is, personally, I think it's a good pick. I talked about this yesterday on the show. Essentially, He is a very, very good political communicator. He is somebody who also, I think, has a very good and effective view of politics. He is somebody who has been pretty moderate in the past. He's somebody who's been very, close to Israel in the past. I know Josh Shapiro came in for a lot of criticism for that. He probably has been, more consistently close to Israel in recent vintage, but there's also plenty of records and quotes that you can go back of Tim Walz being pretty complimentary towards Netanyahu and Israel. So, that is one issue where, he's not the best. He hasn't been, he has been moderate on some issues, but he is somebody who, I think most importantly, he's starting with the least important, I guess, he is, at least in my mind, he's a very likable guy. He is somebody who just comes off. He's one of those politicians that knows how to come off as human. You forget that he's a politician. You could imagine talking to him in your living room. And it is something that is, pretty important, I think, when it comes to that. And it allows him to be a very effective communicator. I think this is very, very clear. But he's also somebody who, and I saw this quote kind of circulating around. I think is a very important quote when it comes to understanding how he exactly, goes about politics and thinks about all this stuff. So this is a quote from the New York Times. Mr. Walz, who is from back when he was chair of the Democratic Governance Association, was unapologetic about all the change. And he has an incredible record. And one of the people, this is what kind of how I took a liking to him originally. He may not be the most, bleeding heart leftist, maybe like I am in the world, but he got a lot of stuff done. He got I have the list here in front of me, but he essentially got a laundry list of all these progressive policies done: universal school meals, stronger labor protection, cannabis legalization, stronger LGBTQ protections, paid leave, sick leave as well, 100% clean energy by 2030 for Minnesota, reproductive rights protected, as he mentioned in that video, $1 billion for housing, gun safety, and child poverty cut by 1/3. So, he's just someone who gets stuff done, and he doesn't just get, bad stuff done. He doesn't get, Republican light stuff done. He actually is able to get progressive policies done. He's able to get, they shouldn't be progressive. They should be square in line with what the Democratic Party, the mainstream of the Democratic Party, is offering to the American people. And he's able to get that stuff done, and he cares about getting that stuff done. And, this is what's important here. He views his role in politics to get this stuff done. It was an incredible array of bills passed, an incredible, Minnesota Democratic Farmer Laborer Party that was able to win elections in very tight races by running on this economic populist campaign, and then they were able to get that stuff done, and they were able to propel one of their own to the vice presidency, probably to the vice presidency. I think Harris is more likely than not to win. Right now, Minnesota is showing the country you don't win elections to bank political capital. He wrote in 2023, as the legislative session ended, you win elections to burn political capital and improve lives. This is something the Democratic Party has just fundamentally not been able to understand for decades and decades and decades, and is really heartening. No matter what you think of, every little minute policy detail, he's had a lot of strong, kind of a strong progressive streak recently, and this kind of being his underlying philosophy and bringing that to the administration, bringing good relationships with a lot of members of the House as well, like that is a very, very powerful thing. And it shows that hopefully, when the Harris administration inevitably hits kind of a rough patch or, loses its way a little bit, he will potentially be a voice to say, don't forget what our guiding principles is to get this stuff done for people. And, I think people are giving a little bit of a hagiography right now, and I think it's something to be said. When he's the vice president, a lot of people are very excited about this ticket on the just broader kind of culturally democratic side of American life right now. So you're going to see that a little bit. But I think this bottom stuff, this bottom line foundational stuff of I'm in politics not just to burn or to bank political capital, but to burn it and improve people's lives is so key. And I think he's, it's going to be tough for the Republicans to define him because they're kind of really just generally caught up in their own shadow right now. They can't get out from under themselves, especially in the wake of Kamala taking to the top of the ticket. Maybe they could define Kamala a little bit easier. I think she's less of a skilled politician than Walz is. He's just somebody who just comes off as so normal, so likable, and just says what a lot of people are thinking in a way that resonates with people. He says the Democratic message, in a way that resonates with people, instead of Hillary's kind of great moralizing tone that took place in 2016 about isn't this awful? Our children are watching. Like, this is a shame. We need to rise up against this to save the country. Walz is like, hey, we'll still have a country, but we're not going to lose democracy or whatever. But hey, these guys are pretty weird. And just that kind of observation is a very, very effective thing. In addition to having that philosophy, being able to have a certain level of in-touchness, for lack of a better word, with the average person is a very, very powerful political asset. And being able to communicate so effectively is going to be very, very powerful and tough for the Republicans to define him. I certainly do think. So here's how it sounded. Like, this is so weird to me. Like, how did they plan this? Like, this is clearly a planned phone call, but this is the supposed first call where Kamala told Tim Walz that she wanted him to be the vice president.
Hi, this is Tim.
It's Kamala Harris. Good morning, Governor.
Good morning, Madam Vice President.
Listen, I want you to do this with me. Let's do this together. Would you be my running mate and let's get this thing on the road?
I would be honored, Madam Vice President.
The joy that you're bringing back to the country, the enthusiasm that's out there, it'll be a privilege to take this with you across the country.
Well, let me tell you, I have just the utmost respect for you. I have really enjoyed our work together. You understand our country. You have dedicated yourself to our country in so many different and beautiful ways. And we're going to do this. We're going to win. And we're going to unify our country and remind everyone that we are fighting for the future for everyone.
Yes, it's like she's almost like reading off a bit of a script. It feels very scripted, fake, and kind of it's like, why would they put this out? Like, everyone knows how fake this is. Just a little weird moment that I saw, but it is a very exciting time in the Democratic Party. Some people aren't as happy though. This here is from Morning Joe Scarborough. I think I'm just calling Morning Joe Scarborough all the time. Kind of like that. I don't know why, but this is from Scarborough about, he was really not, this is right as this was coming out around 9 o'clock. This is why he did not shoot. This is when the news came out about Walz over Shapiro. Scarborough was not happy. Take a look at this.
Well, exactly. Canada has to make the decision herself. And I will tell you, the candidate that I'm most comfortable with is a candidate that helps me win Pennsylvania in 2024. So let us hope, Jonathan Lemire, that those outside of Pittsburgh loves Tim Walz. So talk about Walz.
Yeah,
let's talk about how the decision not made, the road not taken. Josh Shapiro, a guy that has approval ratings in the 60s in Pennsylvania. The must-win state for both campaigns, and also the one who was considered the front runner for a very long time. But then there was a backlash, and we heard backlash. There was a very public campaign against Josh Shapiro, and a really ugly whisper campaign against Josh Shapiro, and it's unfortunately that's something that is now hanging over this choice.
I just had to play the end there for the audible water choking there. I was like, what the heck is going on in that Morning Joe studio? They were not happy. Scarborough had a big thread over the weekend about, this is anti-Semitism. The fact that, people on the left, they clearly don't want to support a Jewish person just because they're Jewish. Like, no, that people, just like everyone, they want to support, I want to support a candidate no matter what their race is or their ethnicity or religion, whatever. I want to support somebody who agrees with me and shares my vision for the country. And something about Shapiro calling people KKK protest or the Palestinian protesters, like comparing them to the KKK, didn't really fit with my vision, and I don't think it fit with a lot of left-wing people's visions either. I think, Tim Walz, he was much more conciliatory to the protest in kind of public interviews. In the uncommitted campaign, he paid a lot of lip service to, as it did pretty well in Minnesota. But this is a kind of pretty interesting thing. So why was Shapiro passed over? He was kind of the favorite. A lot of people in the Democratic Party liked him kind of for the moderate side of things. He was a Jewish guy that would be able to appeal to some of the people that they believe are pissed off, the Democratic Jews who are pissed off with the party over, I guess, not handling or being too nice to the pro-Palestinian base. I don't know. You'd have to explain that one to me personally. This is what I've heard and read. But apparently it was just the fact that the Minnesota governor and the vice president just got on so well. And I think that real kind of chemistry that you see with Walz in media appearances is a very real thing. And he was able to kind of use that with Kamala Harris to some great effect. This according to Politico. She also liked his biography. And I think we'll find out a little bit more with what happened. There's kind of conflicting reports with Josh Shapiro. He was less on TV, which I think hurt him a little bit. And he instead did a lot of events in Pennsylvania. One of his biggest selling point was, I'm really popular in Pennsylvania. As you said, heard Scarborough say he's got approvals in the 60s. It was 61% there. And he could add, 0.5% to Harris's margin in the state just simply by being on the ballot. His style, though, was seen by at least some in Harris's world as showboating. One senior Democrat in touch with Harris's team called it counterproductive because there was a big series of Shapiro for VP rallies. Essentially, I'm here, Josh Shapiro for Kamala, but wink, wink, make me the VP. There was a lot of rallies like that Shapiro held in Pennsylvania over the last few weeks, and it did not go well with Shapiro. There was not a great feeling coming out of it, according to out of Shapiro's interview. According to the Harris team. After their meeting on Sunday, Shapiro called Harris's team, interestingly, because I think it says that Shapiro's team didn't really get the sense the interview went that well either. And it made clear that he was struggling with the decision to leave his current job as governor of Pennsylvania in order to seek the vice presidency, according to a person familiar with his election. So this kind of, I didn't want to leave my job in Pennsylvania. It could be a little bit of cope from not having gotten selected and knowing the interview went bad. So I'm just to say, I really like Pennsylvania, but I kind of wanted the VP job. And I think that's probably more likely what it is. And you saw him try to emphasize that in a statement today. But he also, this is kind of another tell that he really didn't want the job. He evidently cast a video and he produced a video with Sherelle Parker, who's the mayor of Philadelphia, saying, we're so glad that Kamala has picked Josh Shapiro as her running mate. And it was like seemingly released early. It's like something they had banked up for when she announced it, and that apparently did not go over well with Kamala Harris's team at all. So this is Jackie Heinrich from Fox News, who said that two sources confirmed on background. The deciding factor in the VP's choice was that what Senator Fetterman said publicly concerned Shapiro's personal ambitions would cause him to upstage or override Harris. The video produced by Philadelphia Mayor Sherelle Parker's team solidified the sentiment on Friday, but apparently Shapiro's team was not aware that the Parker's office had produced the video, and there was no communication about its release between Parker and Shapiro's teams ahead of time, a source tells Fox. So either way, did not make it look good for Harris. You don't want to have, that kind of vice president upstaging you, kind of hanging out all the time. Those are, two very talented politicians she chose from, so it's kind of a risk with both of them. But I think it is very, very clear that this did not play a good role. So again, we'll see how much of it is cope. Like, I wanted to stay with my people in Pennsylvania. We were finishing out the first term, run for another term. I'm pretty popular here. Hold it down in a swing state for the Democrats pretty solidly. Or was it, I wanted it, but my personal ambitions got too ambition-y, and that kind of pissed off Kamala Harris to the point where it was not enough, or she ended up going to Walz, or is the fact that there was an incredible amount of baggage with the sexual harassment settlement and the murder-suicide situation that we talked about on yesterday's show, where he essentially covered up one of his longtime kind of political patrons, potentially, murdering his fiancée with a knife to the back of the head, and helps him call it a suicide instead of a pretty obvious homicide. So those things could all be playing a factor, but the bottom line is Shapiro turned down for, whatever reason, and they go with the folksy, getting stuff done, spending your political capital, happy warrior, Tim Walz on the ticket. I think it's a pretty good choice. But then again, I think they would probably be pretty good with both choices. But I think at the end of the day, avoiding that Shapiro baggage concerning those two cases would be more smart than going with him at the end of the day. All right, now to our next story here. We have the Times of Israel essentially saying that they should, they've been getting a little bit of a message from the U.S. and their allies, and it's apparently urging Israel to limit response to an expected Iranian attack. So officials in the U.S.-led multinational coalition that's reportedly preparing to assist in repelling an expected Iranian attack have preemptively warned Israel not to respond too strongly to such an assault, according to Tuesday report. Don't push it, the unnamed officials told Jerusalem, according to Khan News. Think carefully before you attack. In return, the goal at the end of the day is to not lead to an all-out war. In April, a massive drone and missile attack from Iran was foiled by a coalition that reportedly comprised Israel, the U.S., Britain, France, Qatar, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Bahrain. Khan reported on Monday the Western diplomats believe the same coalition can't come together again. Iran said Monday that Israel must be punished for the Hamas terror group leader Ismail Haniyeh's assassination in Tehran, allegedly by Israel, and has vowed to take action, raising worries that its response could bring the rest of the Middle East closer to all-out war. And according to eyewitnesses that have been interviewed by Dropsite News, that this was essentially a drone or some sort of outside projectile that was launched onto the building, not like it was a bomb planted in the way the New York Times was saying. But it is going to be very interesting to see how the U.S. manages this, because will they, again, this has been one of the very, 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 very few times that Joe Biden has actually put his foot down when it comes to dealing with Israel, when it comes to giving them a little bit shorter of a leash, essentially saying, no, I'm not going to let you drag me into an all-out war. I'm going to give you the support to kill as many Palestinians as you want, but if you try and get U.S. troops involved, then, or if you risk getting U.S. troops involved, that is where I draw the line. But on the other hand, we talked about this yesterday, Netanyahu sees this golden opportunity and saying, if we can make it look like, or essentially, if we can get Iran to attack us, the U.S. will have to defend. And if we get Iran to attack us bad enough that starts a full-fledged war, then the U.S. will help us go in and defeat our literal only regional rivals. So that is definitely something that they will be kind of weighing here as we see. This is kind of the two sides' interests very much in contradiction here, and it's going to be interesting to see how they both want damage to Iran, but Israel wants it much more than the United States. So what we are all kind of waiting on tenterhooks to see what the attack looks like. Then that'll send everything into motion. My guess is it'll probably be an attack that draws blood, but as I said yesterday, stops short of really fully going into an all-out war in a place where Israel would feel no choice but to respond in a way that would lead to an all-out war, which I'd like to see. It's kind of a two-pronged response, both by Hezbollah and by Iran separately or potentially together. We don't know. We do not know. And again, the heavy emphasis on the upcoming nature of this attack has been coming for quite a while. But then, of course, the U.S. will try and limit the Israeli response, as it has done, I would say, successfully in the past. It was kind of a very subdued strike the U.S. convinced them to do in exchange for free hand at doing whatever they wanted in Rafah to disastrous effects. So that has to be taken into account as well, because literally the policy is leave us out of it, but kill as many Palestinians as you want. That is Joe Biden's policy, clear as day. And doing it, I think it's pretty clear, doing it, kind of carrying this policy out, it's almost kind of a weird contradiction that Biden has put himself in, because he wants to support Israel, but not give U.S. troops, or not let U.S. troops get dragged into a broader war. But supporting Israel is inviting all these attacks by the axis of resistance, these people associated with Iran, and attacks on the axis of resistance not only go back towards Israel, which in turn, again, as we're seeing now, makes the U.S. likely to go into a larger war to come in and defend Israel, but attacks by the axis of resistance in response to the U.S. supporting Israel also, in small ways, go after the United States and harm U.S. troops right now in this moment. 7 U.S. personnel were injured when 2 rockets hit al-Assad airbase in Iraq on Monday, a defense official said on Tuesday. This is per CNN. 5 U.S. servicemen and 2 U.S. contractors were injured in the attack. First, 5 injured personnel are receiving care at al-Assad airbase, and 2 have been evacuated for further care, the official said. All are in stable condition. The official said the post-strike assessments are still ongoing. It was Iran-aligned militia groups were responsible for the attack there. And again, this is kind of the axis of resistance. They have militias, various militias. I think it's Kataib Hezbollah is one of them, and the al-Assad air base is kind of in central Iraq. And the Iraqi militias that are working with Iran, which Iran is essentially very, very influential in the Iraqi government now after the United States pulled out, because they are not going to be able to stay there forever, and did a great job executing that regime change war there. Iraqi government is very pro-Iranian now, and they are kind of allowing to flourish the axis of resistance, and that includes these militias that are targeting U.S. troops that are there ostensibly to, again, quote-unquote, fight ISIS, which has been supposedly extinct since like 2018, but really to keep an eye on things and essentially do whatever U.S. empire demands in the region. And a big part of that, and again, this is in the eyes of Iran, this is in the eyes of the Axis of Resistance people, which receive, to various degrees funding from Iran, but oftentimes are a lot more anti-Israel, a lot more aggressive, a lot more quick to want to use violence than the central Iranian government, has allowed those groups to kind of flourish. And those groups see the United States, rightfully so, as the chief supporter of Israel, which has not just been bad for the Palestinians, but been kind of terrorizing the whole region. So Lloyd Austin, Defense Secretary, reiterated to Yoav Gallant unwavering U.S. commitment to Israeli security in the face of threats from Iran, Lebanese Hezbollah, and other Iran-aligned militia groups, according to the readout of the call between Gallant and Austin. So again, essentially, they are willing to put all their chips on the table and go down this trap. They're going to fall down this rabbit hole of, these two contradictory goals of keeping U.S. troops safe in the Middle East and keeping them out of a larger war, and then supporting Israel. Because if you do one, if you support Israel, you will beget the other, which is U.S. troops being targeted, inevitably being killed, and perhaps even if things continue to go the way they look like they're going, get drawn into a much scarier, much broader war, which would be a real bad situation. A real kind of contradictory mess of U.S. foreign policy that the United States, even under Kamala Harris, let's be absolutely clear, shows no signs of wanting to stop. All right, last but not least today, this is a pretty incredible story out of the UK. This is by Amelia Morris for Jacobin. Across the country, fascists are committing horrendous acts of racist violence in broad daylight. In Rotherham and Tamworth, hotels housing asylum seekers were set on fire. In Burnley, Muslim graves were vandalized. On social media, videos are said to show young people beating those they perceive to be Muslim in the street. In one post, a man from Hull is pulled by his ear from his car and physically assaulted by a group of masked men. These incidents were sparked by the murder of 3 young girls at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class. The perpetrator was born in Britain to a Christian family. that hasn't stopped far-right groups from weaponizing their deaths to further their Islamophobic and anti-immigration agenda. But the problem is, again, he was not a white guy. I think he was a African Christian or child of African Christian immigrants. He was born in Wales to a Christian family. But again, so you see what they really have a problem with is the skin tone here, and they make it clearer and clearer every single solitary day. But the violence of the last week has been unusually vicious and frightening, but it does not exist in a vacuum. 14 years of conservative rule have seen minority communities used as a scapegoat for worsening inequality time and time again. The history of institutional racism goes back much further in Britain, but you could begin the most recent version of the story at the introduction of the hostile environment, a set of policies that aimed to make Britain feel inhospitable. This feeling was only meant to be sensed by illegal immigrants, according to David Cameron and Theresa May, its architects, but its effects traveled much further. In making it illegal for undocumented migrants to access state support, get jobs, or rent properties, the government created a culture of suspicion around all migrants, and sometimes all people of color, as we saw with this, situation taking place since the really tragic dance class stabbing. Growing numbers of civil society figures, including doctors and teachers, were tasked with checking individuals' immigration statuses, a culture of surveillance that perpetuated a false dichotomy of the good/bad immigrant. Scandal after scandal followed, revealing the horrific abuse of asylum seekers at the hands of the Home Office, deportation of many UN citizens, and a rise in racist hate crimes. Taking place alongside this process was another that saw the media relentlessly demonize non-white migrants and asylum seekers, often through an Islamophobic lens. As Noam Chomsky has observed, after 9/11, Muslims replaced communists as the common enemy of the West, a collective feeling that was designed to manufacture consent for the war on terror, the devastation of which has only driven more countries it affected to seek security in Europe, which is a really, someone could write a book, I'm sure they have, on that kind of paradoxical situation. A landmark 2021 study of the British press found that 60% of articles across all publications were identified as associating negative aspects of behavior with Muslims, with 1 in 4 conflating Islam with terrorism. While the Conservative Party and right-wing press lay the foundations for what we are witnessing this week, then the Labour right must also take its share of responsibility. New Labour helped to embed the Islamophobia of the post-9/11 years as they were in government at the time with new, stronger powers of policing, surveillance, and campaign literature that demonized asylum seekers. Keir Starmer appears to be taking up this mantle. The party's position on immigration in this election pandered to the far right and legitimized the othering of asylum seekers. In his manifesto, Starmer's Labour promised that they would control immigration and remove people who have no right to be here. When answering questions from an audience of Sun readers, by the way, that's probably, the more, base and more trash than like Fox News in the U.S. in terms of just, they got porn on one page and racist headlines about migrants on the next page in the UK. And Starmer, by the way, swore that he was never going to talk to the Sun. But now he's answering questions from an audience of Sun readers in the wake of the election, just a few weeks before the election. Starmer selected a specific target, lamenting that people coming from countries like Bangladesh are not being removed. The words that led to the resignation of Sabina Akhtar, a Bangladeshi labor counselor. The new Labour government did scrap the Conservatives' plan to send immigrants to Rwanda, but that was positioned as a financial decision rather than a moral one. Starmer called it an expensive gimmick. The move was followed up by a renewed pledge to smash the criminal gangs involved in small boat crossings by using anti-terror powers, a connection that once again fuels the villainization of refugees. They're terrorists coming over. Just this week, this is crazy, Sarah Edwards, a Labour MP for Tamworth, referred to the town's Holiday Inn as an asylum hotel. Instead, the townspeople want their hotel back. Days later, that very same hotel was set alight by the far right. It was firebombed completely. And it was a really, really horrific situation in the UK right now. And it really is an example of what happens when there is no strong kind of left-wing force making the argument for migrants and for what immigrants do, for treating immigrants with respect, for viewing them as part of the country and part of the fabric of the society. And it really is, the police budget has been kind of stripped, but it really, really is shocking to see some of the scenes that are coming out of the UK with just the blatant and kind of unrestrained, marauding gangs of young white men on the street, beating people up who are brown, making people roll down the windows of their cars and asking them about their identity. Like it is just a scene out of a horror movie there in the UK for a very long time. And, so far the police response has been, in a word, lacking. Keir Starmer, the prime minister, was very late to come out on this, but the media response, I think, has been the most stunning part of it. And we can see some of the parallels here in the U.S. with the different parts of the media, mainstream central parts. Like, for example, I'll never forget Al Sharpton on MSNBC calling migrants coming across the border an invasion for the very first time. Al, civil rights Sharpton. And that is how this happens. Like, you see this broad cultural acceptance, no one making the argument that migrants are actually good people that contribute to society, and we have to build better infrastructure for them to come and settle here. No one is making that argument. Instead, it is just various degrees of how bad do we need to punish these people for trying to come in and, in 99.9% of cases, seek a better life. And that is how you get not just endangering to migrants, not just shops and stores being burned and looted, but just attacks on all people of color in a profoundly more racist, and a profoundly more dangerous and unhealthy society. So, again, all parts of the UK political spectrum bear responsibility for this, just as all parts of the American political kind of spectrum bear responsibility for the increasing turn against immigrants in America. But let's hope we are able to divert it in some way, shape, or form before it gets to this point here on this side of the Atlantic. So I got for you guys today. Hope you enjoyed the show. Tim Walz, your VP pick. Spencer Walsh, your podcast host for Newsflash. We'll be back tomorrow, maybe. It's Newsflash.